A simple woman, wearing an old baseball cap, worn-out sneakers, and carrying a faded backpack, quietly walked into a luxury bank branch in the heart of Manhattan. Within minutes, she was suspected of being a fraudster, severely insulted, and even had the bank manager call the police to handle her. But what no one knew at that moment was that this woman was actually the most powerful figure at that bank. And what she did next will leave you stunned. Stay tuned until the end of the story, because this emotional and powerful turnaround will surely touch your heart. Amid the bustling and elegant surroundings of Manhattan's largest bank, a middle-aged black woman slowly walked in, immediately drawing attention, not for her noble appearance, but for her simplicity, which seemed strikingly out of place against everything around her. As she passed through the glass revolving door, the cool and luxurious atmosphere inside the bank seemed to contrast completely with her humble and modest appearance. A few employees near the door glanced at her warily, while other well-dressed customers couldn't hide their curiosity, even casting judgmental looks. Mary Collins paused for a moment, gently adjusting her cap to cover more of her face, then moved to take a number for herself. In her own quiet way, she slowly made her way to the waiting area, finding an empty seat to sit, calmly observing the space around her. No one there knew that her quiet presence was about to shake the most prestigious bank in Manhattan that morning. From the moment she entered, Mary could clearly feel the cold indifference from the staff. A few customers and bank employees looked at her with suspicion and discomfort, assuming that she didn't belong in such a luxurious place. The air quickly became thick, as though her presence was an unwelcome stain in the glossy and expensive space of the bank. At the front desk, a young employee named Jessica Carter, with her perfectly curled golden hair and expensive business attire, shot a look of irritation at Mary that was impossible to miss. Jessica furrowed her brow, exchanged a few whispered words with a colleague, then both of them let out a small laugh, their eyes repeatedly darting toward Mary with malice. Mary remained silent, her gaze fixed on the number ticket in her hand, pretending not to notice. At the corner near the door, a tall security guard stood with his arms crossed, scanning Mary from head to toe, his expression cold but betraying an over-the-top vigilance. In his eyes, a woman dressed like Mary surely couldn't have any legitimate reason to be in this bank. Only trouble was lurking. As Mary approached the waiting area, she accidentally brushed against the luxurious leather chair. A middle-aged woman seated nearby quickly pulled her Louis Vuitton handbag closer to her body, as if Mary might pose a threat at any moment. She shot Mary a contemptuous glance, then turned to the man next to her and whispered just loudly enough for Mary to hear, "I don't know how someone like her even gets in here." Mary heard every word clearly, but she chose to stay silent. Her heart felt a small, invisible wound, a sharp ache deep inside. Old memories from her childhood came rushing back, familiar and painful. She took a deep breath, striving to stay calm, knowing that she wasn't here to argue or make a scene. Her true purpose was far more profound than that, and she wouldn't let those scornful looks shake her determination. Mary glanced around once more, discreetly observing each face, every gesture. Her gaze lingered longer on Jessica Carter, who was still laughing and chatting inappropriately with her colleague. Although Mary was completely anonymous to them now, in just a short while, these people would understand one crucial thing. The attitude they showed today would come at a price they wouldn't soon forget. As Mary continued to discreetly watch Jessica and her colleague, she silently observed the attitudes of the bank staff. She soon realized a painful truth. Black customers, those dressed simply, and especially the elderly, were treated with indifference and disrespect. At the counter a few meters away from Mary, an elderly black man with graying hair and a trembling voice was trying to inquire about his modest savings. However, the female employee in front of him didn't even bother to look up from her computer screen. She responded with curt, impatient remarks, as if she were speaking to an annoying child, leaving the old man looking visibly confused and embarrassed. To Mary's left, another black woman, dressed in a janitor's uniform with tired hands still trembling from exhaustion, quietly told the receptionist that she was unable to operate the number-taking machine. In response, Jessica shot her an indifferent, irritated glance and said, "Ma'am, the instructions are right there. Anyone can do it. Please handle it yourself." The woman could only lower her head in apology, her eyes red from humiliation and shame, feeling the scrutinizing gazes of the other customers around her. Mary clenched her fists lightly, a feeling of discomfort and sadness rising in her heart. Just then, her attention was drawn to a small, elderly woman with snowy white hair, awkwardly standing in front of the number-taking machine. The elderly woman, confused, had shaky hands as she pressed random buttons on the screen but received no ticket. A few employees nearby noticed but didn't bother to help. Without hesitation, Mary stood up and gently walked over to the woman. "Excuse me, may I help you with the ticket?" she asked. The elderly woman looked up at Mary, her pale blue eyes showing gratitude. "Thank you, dear. I'm not familiar with these machines." Mary smiled softly, took the ticket for the elderly woman and led her to a nearby seat. Those around them, including Jessica Carter, were now watching and following Mary's every move with a mix of surprise and scrutiny. Jessica raised an eyebrow, smirking mockingly, and leaned toward her colleague, speaking just loud enough for Mary to hear. "They really belong together, don't they? Poor people just know how to bother others." Mary heard every word clearly, but she silently returned to her seat, her face maintaining its calm expression. Inside, her determination had only grown stronger. That small act was just the beginning, because very soon, everyone who thought they could look down on others in this bank would learn a lesson they would never forget, from the simple woman they were laughing at today. Mary quietly returned to her seat, her gaze still fixed on the elderly woman she had just helped, a feeling both familiar and heartbreaking flickering in her heart. It wasn't by accident that Mary was here today, dressed in a way that made her easily dismissed and ridiculed. Behind this seemingly ordinary simplicity, she was actually Mary Collins, the powerful and influential CEO of the most prestigious bank in Manhattan. Mary's quiet presence this morning was the result of a strong decision she had made after receiving numerous letters and emails from black customers and everyday working-class people. These letters shared a common, painful message. They were always treated with contempt by the bank staff, treated with suspicion and disregard, sometimes even publicly humiliated, simply because of their appearance or clothing, which didn't meet the bank's unspoken standards of wealth. Mary clearly remembered one of the most recent letters, written by a woman named Angela Jenkins, a single mother who worked as a janitor in a nearby building. In the letter, Angela shared that she had cried at the counter when a bank employee had called her a beggar when she sought a small loan to pay for her son's tuition. Mary had read the letter over and over again, each time feeling a deep sadness, as though she were witnessing her own story from decades ago. The past rushed back like a tidal wave, bringing with it vivid images of the difficult years Mary had endured. She had once been a girl growing up in Harlem, where the poor streets and dilapidated houses bore witness to her challenging childhood. She vividly remembered the feeling of being chased away by staff at luxury stores when she was young, the disdainful looks from people around her whenever her mother, a hard-working janitor, brought her into a bank to deposit a few modest savings. Because of those painful memories, Mary had vowed that when she became the head of the bank, she would do everything in her power to change the discriminatory attitude that so deeply troubled her. Yet, what hurt Mary the most now was that despite all her efforts to implement new policies and carefully train her staff, the complaints kept coming, as though everything she tried to change was just a surface-level fix, and the prejudices and contempt still simmered within many employees, especially people like Jessica Carter. That's why Mary decided that today she would no longer sit quietly in her office. Instead, she chose a different approach, disguising herself to truly experience the attitudes of the staff towards customers firsthand, so that she could witness with her own eyes who truly deserved their job and who was merely using their uniform to satisfy their own vanity and personal biases. Sitting quietly in the waiting area, Mary knew that in just a few moments she would begin the next steps of her plan. And when her true identity was revealed, those arrogant people would have to face a lesson they could never have imagined. Sitting quietly in the waiting area, Mary's gaze briefly wandered through the polished glass windows of the bank, looking out at the bustling traffic rushing along the street. Amid the dazzling surroundings of downtown Manhattan, her heart was unexpectedly pulled back to a distant past, to the narrow streets and old houses of Harlem, a place she once called home. The memories of her difficult childhood came flooding back, each fragment of her past unfolding like a slow-motion film before her eyes. Harlem, where she grew up, was nothing like the place she sat in now. It was a poor neighborhood, with old apartments, cracked walls stained with dampness, and streets littered with trash. Life here had never been easy, and for Mary, it was even harder than for other children her age. Both of Mary's parents were working class. Her father, Joseph Collins, was a construction worker, spending his days exposed to the harsh sun and cold rain. Mary clearly remembered her father coming home every night with his clothes covered in cement dust, his hands rough with calluses, and his shoulders heavy after a long day of hard labor. Despite being exhausted, he never complained, not once. In Mary's memories, he always smiled gently when he came home, no matter what challenges he faced that day outside the construction site. Her mother, Loretta Collins, worked as a janitor at a local school. Her job was to clean every day, a grueling task that few people valued. Mary had often seen her mother scrubbing filthy restrooms and sweeping long, empty hallways well into the night. The image of her mother returning home at midnight, her hands rough, hair matted with sweat, eyes tired yet still shining with hope, always filled Mary with both sorrow and admiration. Though her parents worked tirelessly, their family still lacked so much. There were nights when their meal consisted of old bread and a can of soup. On cold winter nights, Mary would cling to an old worn-out blanket, feeling the cold drafts sneak through the gaps in the old windows, quietly hearing her parents' sighs from the room next door. Those memories were etched deeply into her mind, like invisible scars that time could never erase. The material deprivation was hard enough, but the emotional toll that Mary and her family endured was even more painful. From a young age, she felt the discrimination and prejudice of those around her. One time, when Mary went with her mother to buy a new dress for her 8th birthday, the store clerk coldly told them, "We don't serve people like you here." Her mother said nothing, just gently took Mary's hand and silently walked out of the store. But Mary, just 8 years old at the time, cried all the way home. Another painful memory was when she went with her father to the bank to withdraw a small amount of money from his meager savings. The bank was crowded that day, and her father, in his old work clothes, still covered in cement dust, awkwardly approached the counter. The bank employee looked at him with disdain and asked rude questions, as if she didn't believe a man like him could have a savings account. Her father, who was always proud and strong, had to lower his head and apologize to the bank employee for not filling out the form correctly. Mary stood by, tears streaming down her face, unable to stop them, as she watched the strongest man she knew being disrespected and looked down upon. It was in that moment that Mary promised herself she would never let anyone disrespect her family again. She understood that only success and status could change her circumstances and protect those she loved, and from that day on, Mary always reminded herself that her life would not be defined by poverty. She decided she would work harder than anyone else to rise above, to escape the vicious cycle of discrimination and injustice. From then on, despite the difficult circumstances, Mary persevered in her studies. She seized every small opportunity, every old book she could borrow from the library, every hour spent studying under the streetlights when the power was out because her family couldn't afford to pay the bills. With her strong will and exceptional intelligence, she earned a scholarship to a top university in New York, slowly rising, leaving behind the hardships of her Harlem childhood. Those memories had never faded in Mary's mind. Though she was now the powerful CEO of Manhattan's most prestigious bank, the tough years of her childhood were the foundation that kept her humble and empathetic. She knew she had to use her power to change perceptions, to eliminate the prejudices that still lingered in society, and especially within her own bank. Today, as Mary disguised herself as an ordinary woman and entered the bank, she knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't just here as a leader gathering insights, she was here to make a strong statement that she had never forgotten where she came from and had never lost her empathy for the vulnerable in society. Mary looked around the bank once more, her gaze growing stronger and more determined than ever. Now, with power and strength in her hands, she knew it was time to make the truth clear, to return justice to those who had been looked down upon, just like her parents had been so many years ago. In just a few minutes, everyone in this bank, especially those who arrogantly looked down on others, would have to face a truth they couldn't possibly have imagined. And Mary, deep in her heart, knew that this would be the first step in fulfilling the quiet promise she made as an 8-year-old girl, through tears and fierce hope, under the streetlight in the Harlem neighborhood all those years ago. The painful memories of her childhood slowly faded in Mary's heart as the cold, impatient voice from the bank's counter rang out clearly through the intercom, calling the next number. Mary flinched slightly, glanced down at the ticket in her hand, and realized that it was her turn. Calmly, she stood up and made her way to the counter where the employee, Jessica Carter, sat, her expression full of arrogance, her eyes scanning the computer screen without bothering to look at the person in front of her. Jessica Carter was well known at this branch for her haughty attitude and her ability to judge customers by their appearance alone. With her glossy blonde hair styled in soft curls, alluring red lips, and a sparkling designer watch on her wrist, Jessica prided herself on her ability to read people. To her, a quick glance was enough to determine whether a customer deserved her time and attention. And clearly, the moment she saw the simple woman before her, Jessica immediately categorized Mary as someone not worthy of proper service. "Hello," Mary said politely, gently placing her ID and bank card on the glass counter in front of Jessica. "I would like to withdraw $72,000 from my personal account." Mary's voice was soft yet clear, just loud enough for Jessica and a few nearby customers to hear. Immediately, Jessica paused all her movements and looked up for the first time since Mary entered. Her eyes widened with suspicion. Her gaze quickly swept over Mary from head to toe, reassessing the shabby clothes, worn-out shoes, and the faded baseball cap. A half-smile appeared on Jessica's lips, one that carried both mockery and irritation, as if she believed she was being wasted on an unnecessary joke. "You want to withdraw? How much?" Jessica repeated, emphasizing each word as though she couldn't believe what she had just heard. $72,000, Mary calmly repeated. Jessica raised an eyebrow, her attitude shifting from annoyance to challenge. She took Mary's card and ID, her fingers touching the papers as if afraid of getting them dirty. Jessica began entering the information into the computer, occasionally glancing at Mary with suspicion, almost certain something was wrong. The screen in front of her displayed the account details, balance, and previous transactions. Jessica immediately frowned, her doubts growing clearer. It was impossible for a person who dressed so poorly, even shabby, to have an account holding such a large amount of money. To Jessica, this made no sense, and there had to be something wrong. "Sorry, ma'am, I need to verify the information." "Please wait a moment," Jessica said coldly, picking up the internal phone and immediately calling the bank manager's office, Mr. Daniel Harris. Daniel Harris didn't take long to come out of his office. He appeared with his usual dignified demeanor, an expensive gray suit, a perfectly knotted dark red tie, carefully groomed graying hair, and an authoritative gaze that swept over the space. Daniel was a senior manager at this branch, famous within the company for his effective management and decisive attitude, but also known for maintaining a cold and unyielding distance from those he deemed unworthy of proper service. "What's the issue, Jessica?" Daniel approached Jessica, his eyes immediately shifting to Mary, as sharp as if he were assessing an unexpected foreign object invading his perfect world. Jessica leaned toward Mary, her voice deliberately lowering to increase the seriousness of the situation. "This woman wants to withdraw a very large sum of money from her personal account, but I suspect she is not the actual account holder. The amount in her account is far too large to match her appearance and behavior." Upon hearing this, Daniel immediately turned his gaze to Mary with suspicion. His expression shifted from curiosity to mockery in an instant, as though he had already judged the situation. "Hello, Mrs. Collins," Daniel said, deliberately reading her name with a clear note of doubt. "You understand that this is a large transaction, and I'm sure you know that we need to verify this very carefully." Mary remained calm, responding to Daniel softly, "I completely understand, and I'm happy to provide any documents you require." Daniel smirked, his attitude now openly dripping with contempt. He looked Mary up and down once again, then turned to Jessica, speaking quietly but clearly enough for Mary to hear. "You're doing the right thing, Jessica. Looks like she doesn't know how thorough we are here. Keep checking carefully. I suspect these documents could be fake." Mary remained silent, trying to suppress the feeling of hurt as she heard those public insults. On the outside, she maintained her composed and polite demeanor, but inside, anger and disappointment began to rise strongly. She was not surprised by what was happening, because this was the exact reason she was here today. Daniel turned and walked away, his face smug, as if he had just completed the important task of protecting the bank's reputation and safety from a potential fraudster. With her manager's backing, Jessica became even more confident, openly treating Mary with increasing disdain. "Please wait a little longer. We will verify your information," Jessica said in a cold tone, her eyes downcast at the computer screen, leaving Mary to stand in silence, subject to the skeptical and judgmental stares of the other customers around her. Mary took a deep breath and patiently stood there. But she knew very well that, in just a moment, the people who were looking at her with contempt and suspicion would have to face an entirely different truth. A truth that would not only make them reconsider their attitudes, but also teach them a deep lesson about humanity and the true value of respect. The atmosphere inside the bank seemed to drop, an unusual silence enveloping the entire transaction area as Daniel Harris returned, his face full of arrogance and self-satisfaction, as though he had just completed an important mission, His cold, sharp eyes scanned the customers waiting in line, finally stopping, locking onto Mary with an expression that couldn't have been more full of contempt and mockery. Daniel approached, the sound of his polished leather shoes echoing coldly on the luxurious marble floor, as though emphasizing the power and important position he held. "Mrs. Collins, or whatever name you're using," Daniel began sarcastically, speaking loudly enough for everyone around to hear. "I think you should stop this little joke right here. Our bank is not a place for you to play this kind of fraud." His words were clear, each one like an invisible knife cutting through the silence, causing all the customers present to turn and look at Mary with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Several people began whispering, some scrutinizing the simple-dressed black woman standing at the counter. Mary maintained her calm expression, trying to control the rising emotions within her. She spoke gently to Daniel, her tone still soft and polite. "I can understand your caution, Mr. Harris, but I assure you that all the documents I have provided are legitimate. You may verify them directly with the banking system to get a clearer picture." Daniel sneered, shaking his head as though hearing a laughable, absurd story. "Verify? Do you think I haven't done that already? Ma'am, the issue here isn't the paperwork. The issue is you, someone like you." He paused, scanning Mary from head to toe once again. "How could you possibly have such a large sum of money? I'm sorry, but this is just too absurd." Jessica, standing behind Daniel, flashed a smug smile. She was clearly pleased with her superior's hard-handed and somewhat insulting treatment of the customer she considered a nuisance. Several other employees began to gather around, as if watching an interesting play unfold before them. A nearby customer whispered loud enough for those beside them to hear, "I never thought I'd see something like this in such a fancy bank." The remark made Daniel even more self-satisfied, believing he was doing the right thing to protect the bank's reputation and safety. "Mrs. Collins," Daniel continued with unmasked derision, "if you're truly innocent, as you say, you wouldn't mind waiting for the police to come and check, would you?" The whispers around them immediately fell silent as the word police was emphasized. All eyes were now on Mary, waiting for her reaction as she stood at the center of the curious and skeptical crowd. Mary looked directly into Daniel's eyes, her voice still calm but firm enough for everyone to hear. "Of course, I'm willing to cooperate, but before you call the police, I hope you'll double-check the information on my account. I don't want to cause unnecessary trouble for anyone." Daniel ignored Mary's sincere suggestion. Instead, he turned sharply to Jessica, his voice now a clear command. "Jessica, call the police right now. Tell them we have a suspected fraud case with forged documents at the downtown branch." Without hesitation, Jessica picked up the phone, dialing the number while casting a victorious glance at Mary. Daniel stood there, arms crossed, wearing a smug smile as if he had just won a battle. The surrounding customers began to stir, some even pulling out their phones to record the strange scene unfolding. Mary stood there, feeling the eyes of everyone around her. Her heart seemed to weigh heavily in her chest. She wasn't angry anymore, only deeply disappointed and heartbroken. The things she had endured in the past, the contempt, the prejudice, and the injustice, were now laid bare once again, but this time in the very place she had poured all her efforts into building and protecting. Daniel took another step forward, standing closer to Mary, leaning down and speaking loudly enough for those nearby to hear his mocking words. "I don't know what you were thinking when you chose our bank to carry out this act, but clearly you've underestimated our ability to manage things, Mrs. Collins." Mary lifted her head and looked directly into Daniel's eyes, her gaze still calm but full of determination. She knew that just a moment longer, and all the mockery, doubt, and arrogance would come crashing down before the truth she was about to reveal. Outside, the sound of sirens grew louder, drawing nearer, signaling that the tension was about to reach its peak. Daniel stepped back slightly, standing straight, his eyes focused on the door, waiting for the police to arrive and deal with the woman he believed to be a reckless fraud. Mary remained in place, her heart ready for the next moment. Part of her felt sorrowful that things had to be clarified in this way, but she understood that this was necessary. And when everything was exposed, not just Daniel, Jessica, or the people watching her now, but the entire bank would have to learn a profound lesson they never expected. The sound of the police siren stopped right in front of the bank, quickly breaking the tense silence that had enveloped the entire branch. Two tall officers stepped inside, their faces bearing the usual sternness when responding to an emergency call. The curious eyes of the customers were all focused on the entrance, with every step echoing loudly on the marble floor, further intensifying the anticipation. Daniel Harris, now feeling even more confident with the arrival of the police, quickly approached them, shaking their hands with great formality, then immediately pointed at Mary, raising his voice so that everyone in the bank could hear. "Officers, this woman is attempting to commit financial fraud at our bank. She's using fake documents to withdraw a large amount of money, up to $72,000. The accusation, firm and certain, rang out like a sharp knife, causing everyone present to turn and look at Mary with suspicious eyes. In that moment, Mary remained silent, not reacting aggressively, her face calm to the point of being almost incomprehensible to those around her. One of the officers approached Mary, his gaze both examining and stern. "Ma'am, we received a report that you are using fake documents to try and steal money from the bank. We need you to explain everything clearly, along with any identification you have." Mary did not appear frightened or angry. Calmly, she gently handed over her documents and bank card to the officer. As he carefully reviewed them, Daniel stood by, adding malicious remarks to stir up further suspicion. "I told you, it's absurd for someone like her to have such a large amount of money. Officers, please check thoroughly. I'm sure the documents are all fake. I've worked in this industry long enough to know." The second officer shot Daniel a thoughtful look, then returned to continue checking Mary's information in their internal system. Meanwhile, the atmosphere grew even more tense as a few customers began whispering openly. "I find it strange, too. How could someone like her be wealthy?" "Yeah, it's definitely a forgery. There are so many clever scammers nowadays." The whispers grew louder, cutting through Mary's outward calm, bringing up painful memories from her childhood that she was trying to suppress. Still, she didn't react strongly, because she knew that the truth would soon be revealed with just a little more time. The officer holding Mary's documents exchanged a few quiet words with his colleague before turning to Daniel, speaking calmly but decisively. "Mr. Harris, before we reach any conclusions, are you absolutely sure about the accusations you've made? We need to confirm everything clearly to avoid serious misunderstandings." Daniel frowned slightly, his attitude becoming annoyed at being questioned. "Of course, I'm sure. As a senior bank manager, I've seen enough scams. She's dressed like that, and yet she wants to withdraw such a large amount. Clearly, she's trying to fraudulently take property. I just want to protect our bank and our customers." His words stirred up even more suspicion from those around them. A few cold stares continued to fixate on Mary, as if she had already been convicted. Jessica stood behind Daniel, clearly pleased with how her superior was handling the situation. For her, this was proof she was right from the start in doubting Mary. Mary quietly observed all of this, her heart aching at the careless words and unkind glances. But she also understood that In order to truly change the perceptions of these people, this was the most crucial moment for her to endure. She spoke softly, yet firmly enough for everyone to hear. "Officers, I fully understand your responsibility and your job. I just ask that you check thoroughly before reaching any conclusions. I don't want anyone to be harmed due to hasty judgments." The officer looked at Mary more intently, his gaze seeming to soften a little in the face of her calm and extraordinary composure. However, Daniel once again interrupted, his voice provocative. "Come on, stop playing the game. I'm sure the police will quickly confirm the truth, and then you won't have any chance to defend yourself." Mary didn't react to the provocation. She stood still, patiently waiting. In her heart, she knew that what was happening today wouldn't just be about clearing her name, but also a great lesson for all the bank's employees, especially Daniel and Jessica, to reflect on their behavior and attitudes. The atmosphere in the bank remained extremely tense, time seeming to slow down, with every second feeling long and heavy. All eyes were on Mary and the two officers, waiting for the truth to be revealed. But what Daniel didn't expect was that he was about to face a completely different truth. A truth that would make him regret every arrogant word and action he had taken today. In the suffocating tension of the moment, Mary slowly looked up, her gaze calm as it met the two officers who were patiently waiting, and Daniel Harris, who was still standing nearby with an expression of smug satisfaction. Silence engulfed the vast space of the bank, and the murmurs of gossip slowly faded, eventually disappearing altogether, giving way to the taut silence of anticipation. Mary, with a composure that seemed almost unshakable, gently broke the eerie stillness. "I would like to speak with Mr. Harris and the officers here in private, before this situation escalates any further." Her voice was soft, yet it carried a distinct firmness that made the two officers exchange a glance and nod in agreement. Daniel furrowed his brow, a mix of surprise and suspicion at Mary's request. Yet his smugness remained, as he was certain the woman before him was simply attempting to delay the inevitable. The small group moved to a separate corner near the transaction counter, far enough to avoid prying eyes, but still close enough for everyone in the bank to observe their interactions. Daniel tilted his chin arrogantly, his voice cold, yet tinged with clear mockery. "Mrs. Collins, what do you want to confess now? Honestly, you've wasted enough of our time." Mary did not respond immediately. Instead, she reached into her coat pocket, retrieved her mobile phone, slowly unlocked the screen, and calmly said, "I don't need to confess anything, Mr. Harris, but I believe it's time for you and the officers here to know exactly who I am." Daniel raised an eyebrow, his expression shifting into one of doubt and impatience. But before he could speak further, Mary raised her phone towards him and the two officers. Her gaze remained serene, composed, as she gently added, "Please take a look at my digital ID. I believe this will clarify everything." The two officers stepped closer, attentively looking at the phone screen. Daniel initially sneered, but then his curiosity got the better of him, and he glanced at the small screen. It only took a few seconds for his expression to change from disdain to shock, then to complete stillness and astonishment. The phone's screen clearly displayed the name, title, and official logo of the bank. Mary Collins, Chief Executive Officer, Manhattan Trust Bank, New York. The atmosphere seemed to freeze in that moment. Daniel's face turned pale, his eyes wide with shock, his mouth slightly agape but unable to speak. All the arrogance and self-satisfaction he had shown earlier evaporated entirely, replaced by utter panic and confusion. The two officers exchanged a look, their expressions filled with amazement. One of the older officers quietly spoke, breaking the heavy silence. Mrs. Collins, is this ID real? Mary gently nodded, her face still maintaining an astonishing calm. Yes, I am the CEO of this bank, and I am here today for a covert review to verify reports about discriminatory behavior from the bank's staff toward customers. Her soft yet decisive words struck like thunder in the still air. Though she had kept her voice quiet, those nearby still heard every word clearly. A wave of murmurs quickly spread through the bank, all eyes now focused on Daniel, who was standing there like a statue, unable to believe what he had just heard. From the transaction counter, Jessica also froze, her face shifting from triumph to pale fear. Her colleagues, who had previously looked at Mary with scrutiny, now lowered their heads, avoiding each other's gazes, their faces marked by shame and anxiety. Daniel tried to regain his composure, his voice trembling and completely lacking the confidence he once had. Mrs. Collins, I didn't know. I was just trying to protect the bank from fraud. Mary looked at Daniel with a stern yet composed expression. Mr. Harris, the issue isn't whether you're trying to protect the bank. The issue is your discriminatory attitude and your lack of respect toward customers. You hastily judged me based on my appearance without properly verifying the real information. At this, Daniel lost all his initial arrogance, now fumbling like a child caught in a mistake. Mrs. Collins, I truly apologize. I never thought. Mary gently interrupted him, her voice still calm but strong enough for him to understand the seriousness of the situation. I think you need to understand one thing. Every customer who steps into our bank deserves the same respect, regardless of their appearance, clothing, or skin color. This is a core value that our bank is committed to upholding, and clearly you have severely violated this principle. The two officers, now fully aware of the situation, stepped back slightly, their expressions showing a subtle apology to Mary. But Daniel remained there, still stunned and full of confusion. Across the bank, whispers grew louder, all eyes now on Mary with admiration and respect. Just moments ago, she had been the target of suspicious and contemptuous looks. But now, with the truth revealed, her position had completely shifted, and the one who stood before the crowd's derision and judgment was none other than Daniel Harris. Mary gently placed her phone back in her pocket, knowing that this was just the beginning of the profound change she intended to bring to this bank. And she also knew that the lesson learned today would not be easily forgotten by anyone who had witnessed it. The two officers immediately turned to Mary, their expressions becoming serious and respectful. The older officer gave a slight nod, his voice lowering in sincere apology. Mrs. Collins, we are truly sorry for the misunderstanding. Please understand we were simply doing our duty when we received the alarm call from the bank. Mary smiled gently, her face still calm, showing no anger or reproach. I completely understand you are just doing your job. Thank you for responding quickly and handling this professionally. The two officers relaxed, quickly withdrawing as they exited the bank under the gaze of dozens of curious eyes. The atmosphere inside the bank shifted dramatically. From doubt and criticism towards Mary, it now turned into astonishment, admiration, and some embarrassment over their own previous actions. As soon as the officers disappeared from view, Daniel Harris quickly moved toward Mary, his face no longer exuding the confidence or arrogance it once did. Instead, Daniel looked awkward, his face dazed and filled with fear, his hands fidgeting together nervously. Mrs. Collins, Daniel began, his voice trembling, his eyes trying to avoid the stern gaze of the woman standing before him. I really didn't know. I didn't know you were the CEO of the bank. If I had known, I would never have. Mary slowly raised her hand, signaling Daniel to stop. She looked him straight in the eyes, her gaze sharp, yet still maintaining its inherent calm. "Mr. Harris, the issue isn't whether you knew who I was or not. The real issue is the attitude and the way you treated me simply because of my appearance and skin color. That is unacceptable anywhere, especially in a large bank that I have poured my heart into building." Daniel tried to explain, his voice becoming even more confused and disjointed. "That's not it. I was just trying to protect the bank from potential risks. You know, there are so many cases of fraud nowadays. Honestly, I didn't mean to discriminate or look down on anyone. It's just, with the way you were dressed and wanting to withdraw such a large sum, I couldn't help but be suspicious." The words Daniel spoke only further exposed the deeply ingrained racial biases he held. The crowd of customers and bank employees nearby stood in silence, each awkward word from Daniel cutting into his own dignity, making him further harm his own reputation. Mary remained incredibly calm, listening to Daniel and then speaking gently but firmly. "Mr. Harris, your words and thoughts just now are the clearest evidence of what I am trying to change in this bank. You've inadvertently revealed your own prejudices. Those biases are the root cause of today's issue." Daniel stiffened, his face now a mixture of fear and shame. All the confidence and arrogance he had shown earlier evaporated completely. His eyes avoided the gaze of those around him, but no matter how hard he tried, he could feel the disappointment and disdain from his colleagues and the customers nearby. Jessica Carter, standing nearby, was now in even more of a panic. She stepped back, lowering her head, trying to avoid Mary's stern gaze. All the arrogant, self-satisfied expressions she had earlier now vanished, replaced by a pale and fearful face as she realized the consequences of her own thoughtless actions and words. Daniel tried once more to salvage the situation, his voice weak and almost pleading. "Please, Mrs. Collins, I beg you to give me a chance to correct the mistake I made today. I will immediately organize a meeting with all the staff to correct our customer service attitudes and ensure this never happens again." Mary looked at Daniel for a long moment, her gaze thoughtful but tinged with disappointment. "I believe what happened today is not the first time you've had this attitude, Mr. Harris. If it were just a simple mistake, I wouldn't be here today. In fact, the letters of complaint and concern that have reached me are increasing, and they all directly relate to the branch you manage." Daniel froze, his face draining of color as he heard Mary's words. Her voice was authoritative, each sentence ringing out strongly, making Daniel feel like he was standing trial as the defendant. "You've had many opportunities to change, but you've overlooked them all. You've always believed that your power and position were enough to hide the biases you carry within. But the truth is, those things can never be hidden forever." Daniel fell completely silent, knowing he no longer had any defense left. The looks from everyone around him had shifted from admiration to obvious disappointment and contempt. Everyone in the bank was waiting for the next decision from the powerful woman standing before them. Mary gently looked around, fully aware that this was the crucial moment for changing the work culture within the bank she led. She turned back to look Daniel straight in the eyes, her voice becoming more stern than ever. "I think you need to take some serious time to reflect on yourself, Mr. Harris. What you've shown today hasn't just hurt me, but it's also hurt our other customers, those who have been treated unfairly and disrespectfully for so long." Daniel stood motionless, unable to say anything further. The entire bank had fallen into silence, and everyone understood that, from this moment forward, things would never be the same. For Mary, she knew this was just the beginning of the long journey ahead, a journey to completely erase the biases and discrimination that still lingered in the hearts of people like Daniel and Jessica, to restore fairness for everyone. The tense silence that had gripped the entire bank was suddenly broken by Mary Collins' soft yet decisive voice. Her gaze remained calm, but this time there was an added firmness that was unshakable. Slowly, Mary reached into her coat pocket, pulling out her mobile phone. Her movements were deliberate and slow, causing everyone to hold their breath in anticipation of what she would do next. Daniel Harris, standing nearby, had completely lost the usual confidence he exuded. He was fidgeting, his eyes filled with confusion and fear. Every passing second felt like an eternity for him, the suffocating feeling of wanting to escape, yet his legs wouldn't move. Beside Daniel, Jessica Carter stood frozen, her face pale, trying to avoid Mary's piercing gaze, as though waiting for the storm she feared was about to hit. Without hesitation, Mary initiated a video call to the bank's Human Resources Director, Andrew Peterson. When the connection was made, Andrew's serious face immediately appeared on Mary's phone. He was slightly surprised upon recognizing the background behind Mary, which was the busy Manhattan branch, but quickly regained his composure, as expected from a high-level executive. "Mrs. Collins, is there something I can assist you with?" Mary turned the phone toward Daniel and Jessica, ensuring that Andrew could clearly see both of them on the video call. Her voice was clear, without hesitation, but full of authority. "Mr. Peterson, I'm standing at the Manhattan branch, and I regret to report to you that we have a serious issue regarding professional ethics here. Manager Daniel Harris and employee Jessica Carter have acted with severe discrimination toward a customer, specifically myself, as I am disguised as an ordinary person. Their actions not only personally insult me, but they also cause significant harm to the reputation of our bank." Mary's clear and firm words caused a sudden hush among everyone witnessing this. Daniel felt his heart tighten. Every chance he had to salvage the situation evaporated with her clear accusations. Jessica was on the verge of tears, her hands trembling as she tightly clenched them together, her face showing pure regret and fear. Andrew Peterson, known for his strictness and directness in his work, quietly listened to Mary's report, his expression growing even more serious. "Mrs. Collins, I fully understand the severity of this issue. Please let me know your decision, and I will act immediately." Mary took a deep breath, her gaze now fixed on Daniel, her words coming out strong and clear. "I request that you immediately begin the process of firing Mr. Daniel Harris for serious violations of professional ethics. I cannot accept someone like him continuing to represent our bank." Mary's words hit like sharp knives, leaving Daniel motionless. His face turned pale, cold sweat beginning to bead at his temples. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. Mary's authority made him realize that he no longer had a chance to fix his mistakes. Mary then turned her gaze toward Jessica, her voice still calm but no less firm. "As for employee Jessica Carter, she should be suspended effective immediately while a thorough investigation into her actions is conducted. I want this matter to be fully clarified and handled in the most fair and transparent manner." Upon hearing this, Jessica's tears began to fall, her shoulders shaking. She tried to say something, but her voice caught in her throat, unable to form words. In that moment, all the arrogance and self-satisfaction she had earlier vanished, replaced by pure fear and regret. Andrew Peterson nodded quickly, not hesitating to respond to Mary's request. "I understand and will implement this immediately, Mrs. Collins. I will also arrange for someone to replace Mr. Harris at the branch to ensure no disruption in work." The call ended in the tense silence of the entire bank. Daniel Harris stood still, his head lowered, not daring to face the eyes of anyone around him. Those who had once admired and respected him now looked at him with pity or reproach. Jessica remained frozen, her face pale, unable to comprehend that a single moment of error had cost her everything. Mary slowly put her phone back in her pocket, looking around at everyone present. Her voice rang out gently but powerfully, a statement that could not be misunderstood. What happened here today is the clearest proof of how prejudice and discrimination can destroy the reputation and careers of those involved. I hope everyone here understands this lesson, and I will never tolerate such behavior happening again in this bank. Her words echoed in the silent space, causing every employee and customer present to feel the weight of the authority of the woman standing before them. Everyone realized that from this moment on, everything in the bank would have to change completely, and there would be no room for prejudice or unfair actions. For Mary, the decision she had just made wasn't simply a punishment for Daniel and Jessica. It was a powerful statement to the entire bank. She would do whatever it took to ensure that the dignity and self-respect of every customer would always be upheld. And today, the first step in that long journey had officially begun. As soon as Mary placed her phone back in her coat pocket, she gently took a deep breath, her eyes slowly scanning the faces of everyone who was watching her intently in the bank. From the employees who stood still, stunned by the revelation, to the customers who looked at her with admiration and sympathy, all eyes were on the woman who had just made a powerful decision. Mary took a step forward, standing gently in the center of the large space of the bank, where everyone could see her clearly. Under the warm light of the luxurious crystal chandeliers, she was no longer just a simple woman who had been doubted, but a living embodiment of fairness, power, and compassion. Her voice rang out softly but with authority, like a fresh, powerful breeze, strong enough to reach the deepest corners of the hearts of those present. I want everyone here to understand this clearly, Mary spoke, her words spreading through the vast space, each one resonating with strength and clarity. Our bank is not just a place for financial transactions. It is a place where trust and respect are placed. And most importantly, every customer who walks through these doors, no matter who they are, what they look like, the color of their skin, or the way they dress, deserves to be treated with the utmost respect from all of you. She paused for a moment, allowing each word to sink into the minds of those around her. The silence now shifted into a new state, one of deep respect and full attention. No one dared to look away from the powerful woman standing in the middle of the room. They understood that this was not just an ordinary declaration, but a profound change in the philosophy and core values of the bank. Mary's gaze softened slightly, but her resolve remained firm as she continued, her voice gentle but unyielding. From now on, every customer who walks through this door must be treated as if they are the most valuable customer. None of them should ever be looked down upon because of their appearance, skin color, or clothing. If any of you feel that you cannot uphold this standard, I suggest you leave the bank immediately, because we will no longer tolerate any form of discrimination. Mary's gaze swept across the employees who were standing in silence. The young employee at the corner of the counter, who had often been looked down upon by Jessica due to her humble background, now looked at Mary with eyes full of gratitude and emotion. The other employees, who may not have previously realized the harm their actions caused, now lowered their heads, silently understanding the heavy responsibility they needed to bear from that moment onward. Daniel Harris, still standing frozen, felt each of Mary's words as if they were suffocating his heart. For years, he had believed that his power and status were enough to overshadow any disrespectful actions toward others. But now, he realized that this blind arrogance had led him to a more painful outcome than he could ever have imagined. Jessica Carter, still standing next to him, had tears streaming down her face. She was not only in pain from the consequences of her wrongful actions, but also from the realization that she had allowed trivial prejudices to influence how she treated others, losing all sense of compassion and basic kindness. Mary looked at Jessica, her voice softening, full of empathy yet still resolute. "I know these changes won't be easy, but the most important thing is that we must recognize our mistakes and never repeat them. This is not just a rule, but a commitment to all the customers who have trusted us and chosen us." The first hesitant applause began, growing quickly into a strong and unified round of applause. Customers, employees, everyone present was moved by Mary's sincere and profound words. To them, she was not just a powerful leader, but a living symbol of compassion and fairness, something they had longed to see for so long. Mary stood still, silently accepting the heartfelt response. She knew that this was not just a small victory for her, but a great victory for everyone who had suffered from societal prejudices. She remembered her mother, the poor janitor from Harlem, and her father, a hard-working construction worker, who had always taught her that the value of a person should never be measured by their appearance, skin color, or wealth. It was those memories of her parents and her humble childhood that gave Mary the strength to persevere in doing what was right, no matter the obstacles. And now, standing in the vastness of this bank, she felt an unusual sense of peace, as though she had just completed a sacred mission she had been striving toward her whole life. As the applause began to fade, Mary spoke once more, concluding her speech with a powerful and hopeful message. "I believe that from today onward, our bank will be a place where every customer is welcomed, respected, and treated fairly. This is not just my commitment, but all of yours. I hope you will join me in fulfilling this, not just for the bank, but for each one of us." Mary's words echoed with strength and persuasion, making everyone in the bank feel the weight of their responsibility. Everyone understood that from this moment on, they would not only change how they treated customers, but they would also need to change themselves to become better and more just individuals. And for Mary, this was not just a strong message she wanted to send. It was the beginning of a hopeful journey toward long-lasting and profound change, both in the hearts of individuals and in society. As the warm applause in the bank slowly subsided, Mary quietly glanced around one last time, as if she wanted to commit every face, every expression before her to memory. She understood that what had just transpired today was not merely a surprise inspection, but a crucial turning point, a beginning of a new journey where respect, equality, and compassion would become the core values that would guide everyone forward. Before leaving the bank, Mary's gaze involuntarily lingered at the corner of the waiting area, where the elderly woman she had helped earlier still sat quietly. The woman's eyes were filled with emotion as she looked at Mary, her eyes glistening with tears, as if she could feel the profound value of Mary's words and actions today more than anyone else. Without hesitation, Mary gently walked over to the elderly woman, each step filled with care and sincerity. When she stopped in front of the woman, the elderly woman immediately stood up, her aged hands trembling as she reached out to warmly and gratefully take Mary's hand. Her voice, trembling but full of emotion, was soft yet clear enough for those standing nearby to hear. "If everyone in power were as kind and understanding as you, the world would be a much better place." Those simple but sincere words made Mary's heart tighten just a little. She gazed deeply into the elderly woman's kind eyes, now marked by age, and gently tightened her grip on her hand. Her voice also trembled with emotion, but it was crystal clear and sincere as she replied, "We just need to do our part well, and the world will surely get better, little by little." The people standing nearby, both bank employees and customers, felt their hearts stir with every word. A few customers who had previously maintained a skeptical or indifferent attitude now felt a strong surge of emotion rising within them. The bank employees, especially the younger ones, looked at Mary with deep respect and admiration. They suddenly understood that the greatest strength of power lies not in domination or punishment, but in empathy, sharing, and the ability to create positive change for those around us. Meanwhile, from a distance, Daniel Harris quietly watched this deeply emotional moment. His face had turned pale, his eyes as if awakening from a long dream in which he had always believed his power was unlimited. The biases, arrogance, and contempt for others now appeared clearly in his mind like a sharp mirror, reflecting all the wrongs he had caused. Jessica Carter, standing nearby, also quietly wiped away the tears of regret. She looked at Mary and the elderly woman standing together, and for the first time in her life, Jessica deeply realized that she had lost sight of the most fundamental human values. She understood that her discriminatory actions had not only hurt others, but had also distorted the best qualities within herself. Mary gently continued to engage with the elderly woman, asking a few more questions, offering care and encouragement with all the sincerity in her heart. Before leaving, Mary carefully handed the elderly woman her personal business card, her voice gentle but clear. "Here is my contact information. If you ever face any difficulties in the future, please don't hesitate to reach out directly to me. I will always be happy to help." The elderly woman clutched the business card as if it were the most precious gift she had ever received. Her eyes were filled with tears as she softly and tremblingly responded, "I truly thank you so much, Mrs. Collins. Today, you've not only helped me, but you've also helped all people like me realize that we are worthy of respect and love." Mary smiled warmly, nodding gently, and then slowly turned to leave the bank. Each step she took radiated confidence and genuine pride, knowing that what she had done today was not merely a personal action, but a powerful declaration of compassion, fairness, and social responsibility that all people in power must embody. As Mary passed through the bank's glass doors, a gentle stream of morning light from Manhattan poured down on her, as if nature itself was congratulating her for what she had just accomplished. She paused for a moment, feeling the soft warmth of the sunlight, and her heart felt lighter and more at peace than ever before. The people in the bank remained standing in silence for a long while after she left, as if they still couldn't quite believe what they had just witnessed. But deep in their hearts, they all understood that they had just witnessed something extraordinary, an event that not only inspired them but also made them reflect on themselves, realizing that the best change begins with the kindness and compassion of each individual. As for Mary, she left the bank with a sense of peace in her heart, knowing that today she had completed an important mission, not just for herself, but for all those who had suffered from prejudice and injustice in this society. The gentle morning sunlight of Manhattan continued to fall softly on the busy streets, but inside the bank, those who remained seemed to still be reeling from the deep impact of what had just occurred. The moment Mary stepped out through the glass doors, everyone felt a strange, unexpected sense of awakening, a realization they hadn't anticipated. What seemed like a simple story of a woman dressed plainly, walking into the bank had now become the most vivid symbol of change. Immediately following the event, Mary Collins directed the implementation of a comprehensive overhaul campaign, unprecedented in the bank's history. She knew that while specific actions, no matter how significant, were just the beginning, the real change would require new, clear, and decisive policies to alter the deep-seated attitudes and behaviors of every employee. Just days later, an official notice from Mary was sent out to all bank branches across the system, clearly stating that any form of discrimination would be met with the strictest penalties. At the same time, she launched a series of in-depth training sessions on professional ethics, social equality, and customer respect skills, featuring top experts in human resources management and corporate culture. These training sessions were not only for new employees but also mandatory for senior leadership. Even those who had held important positions for years, like Daniel Harris, who despite being fired, served as a stark reminder of the consequences of arrogance and prejudice, became a living example for everyone to learn from and reflect upon. As for Jessica Carter, after her suspension, she requested to participate in these training programs. She didn't just want to make amends, she truly wanted to understand the value of respect, compassion, and the impact of the unconscious biases she had never before recognized. Through each training session, Jessica transformed from a proud, dismissive employee to one who was more open, willing to listen, and more understanding. For her, that painful event became a crucial turning point that helped her rediscover her own values. As for Mary, she publicly declared that she would continue to disguise herself and visit other branches throughout the entire banking system, ensuring that the message and change wouldn't just stay on paper, but would truly manifest in the everyday reality of the bank's operations. This declaration quickly spread throughout the bank, not only earning her absolute admiration, but also serving as a stark warning to anyone who still held onto outdated discriminatory views. Stories of the events at the Manhattan branch quickly became a widely discussed topic on social media and in the press. What Mary Collins had accomplished not only made a huge impact in the banking community, but also became an inspirational lesson in humility, compassion, and the determination to fight societal prejudices. Many schools, community organizations, and businesses began using this story as an example in their educational programs, emphasizing that respect and equality cannot be easily overlooked. Mary Collins' name became a powerful symbol, not only of a powerful CEO, but also of a truly empathetic person who used her position to create positive changes within her community. Meanwhile, Daniel Harris, after leaving the bank, withdrew completely from public life. He spent a long time reflecting on his mistakes. The events of that day became an obsession for him, but also a valuable lesson that forced him to confront himself honestly, realizing that biases and arrogance could easily destroy everything he had built. Months later, Daniel publicly spoke out, offering a heartfelt apology to Mary and all the customers he had hurt. In his emotionally charged speech, he said sincerely and decisively, "I've lived too long in my own blindness and arrogance, forgetting that the true value of a person is never based on their skin color or appearance. I hope that my serious mistake will serve as a strong reminder to those who still carry the biases I once did." Daniel's speech contributed significantly to spreading Mary's message, helping others realize that anyone can make mistakes, but the most important thing is to acknowledge those mistakes, make amends, and commit to change from deep within. Mary continued to lead the bank with a new vision, always focusing on fairness, respect, and compassion. Under her leadership, the bank quickly became one of the leading organizations in social responsibility, inspiring other businesses to follow suit. As the story of Mary Collins spread beyond the boundaries of the bank, many people shared their deep feelings about the event. Some customers wrote letters to thank Mary, sharing how, for the first time, they felt truly respected when they stepped into the bank. These stories became more and more frequent, genuine and moving, helping Mary feel more than ever the profound meaning of what she had done. For Mary, that event was not just a personal victory, but also a symbol of a greater change in society. It reminded her that sometimes it is courage, compassion, and belief in the right values that can move hearts and bring about change. Mary knew that this journey would never stop here, but she also understood that as long as everyone was willing to do their part, the world would certainly become a better place. Just as she had said that day to the elderly woman at the bank. And to her, that was the deepest message, the true value of life, and the mission she would continue to pursue throughout her life. The story of Mary Collins is not only a profound lesson about compassion and fairness, but also a reminder that the true value of a person is never measured by their appearance or social status, but by their heart and actions. And what about you? Have you ever witnessed or experienced a similar situation? Please share your story in the comments below so we can spread these positive and inspiring messages together. And don't forget to like the video, share this story with many people, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the meaningful content ahead. We believe that every share and every story told helps make the world a better place, little by little. Thank you for being with us and listening. See you in the next stories.